Good morning. This is Avraham Shira from Nar Shalom. This morning we're going to learn in Likutei Moharan, in the second section, a very fascinating idea about honor and the spread of prophecy and the glory of the collective souls of Israel. And as always, the Rebbe is teaching us processes of how these phenomenon come into the world. So we're going to begin in the paragraph Hey, and it begins Al Yedei Hitgalut HaKavod Ba Hitpashtut HaNevuah. Through the revelation of glory, of honor, there's a spread of prophecy. Now, like in all Torah learning, there are phrases that we have to open up, and we have to examine them and understand them, not on the simple face value of the translation itself. What does it mean, the revelation of glory or kavod, and what does it mean, the spread of prophecy? Now, this whole Torah has been leading to this point, and we're talking about literally thousands of words have led us to this conclusion. That before we learned that the revelation of God's glory is greatest when people convert, especially famous, powerful people like Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses. And when people like that convert, it brings great glory to God's name, because suddenly people realize there's something to this Jewish experiment. There's something to this Bible that we didn't understand. It's not just a book. And the change that takes place through the knowledge that somebody like that, like Yitro, who is the head priest of Midian, one of the main nations in the Middle East at that time, that affects a lot of other people. And so that increases God's glory, because suddenly they get a download, they get knowledge that there's something going on. You know, the fact that the president of the United States has a daughter who converted to Judaism is a tremendous example of this idea in our generation. Whether you like them or not is not the issue. The issue is that somebody decided to convert, who's on a very high-profile level, who has a lot of influence on a lot of people, and that increases God's glory in the world. The people look up and they wonder, what's going on? Why is this young woman suddenly becoming Jewish? Okay. It's that revelation of that glory of the convert we learned it happens because the Baal Koach, the man of powerful prayer, is able to go into the throat of the snake and make that snake vomit up the holiness and the Kedusha that's been swallowed. And that happens on an individual level and on a collective level, where we spoke about examples of this as well. We see this when a person wants to do tshuva, suddenly he has regrets about all kinds of little things. You know, all the little things that we let go, the words that we say that we shouldn't say, the actions that we do that we shouldn't do, all of those, like, they grab sparks of our true self. And then they hold them down in our throat, as the Rebbe says. That's why Paro is the Otiot Oref, the back of the neck, because Paro's holding on to those pieces of our true self, which we identify as sparks of holiness. But whether you call it true self or sparks of holiness, it depends where you're going to school. But the point is, just like Paro held on to the Jews and wouldn't let them out of Egypt, this Paro that's in the back of the neck, which is identified as this primordial snake, he held on to the Jews in Egypt, so too he's holding on to our holiness, doesn't want to let ourselves speak freely, in prayer especially. When I can just open up and talk to God just like you're talking to each other, just like we're talking right now. And that's the freedom of speech. Wow, it's a new amendment, right? The freedom of speech is the freedom to speak to God. Not the freedom to use four-letter words against your neighbors in public. You know, the freedom of speech that's being promoted nowadays, I don't know. But the true freedom of speech is the freedom to pray, to talk to God, to form an intimate relationship with the Creator, because that's what we're here for. Okay, Now, the earlier parts of the Torah talked about how a person gets to that level of prayer, that his prayer can extract those sparks of holiness. And we're not going to go back over all of that because we'll be here another hour reviewing our review of our review. But we're going to go forward and learn about this idea of the revelation of the kavod, of the glory, and why that, the Rebbe says, leads to the spreading of prophecy. So, first of all, the revelation of glory is a transcendent moment in a person's heart and mind. It's a moment where suddenly we see that there is something behind all this mad video game called Planet Earth. You know, that there's something holding it all together, and it's not just something, but it's a beautiful, powerful, loving, merciful, living entity that we call God. And that revelation suddenly transforms the mind. We're no longer concerned with the little everyday details of life in the same way. The things that bother us don't bother us, that used to bother us don't bother us anymore. All the mundane facts and details that we have to deal with, suddenly they take on a very small part of our life because we have this greater knowledge and awareness of what's going on around us. That people are not just doing things because they're doing things. And the planet is not here just because it is, like the atheists want to say. You know, no, there's a plan, there's a purpose, and there's a program here. And there's an end goal, and there's a reward, and after the reward, there's more and more and more rewards. Okay, but we're not here to serve God for rewards. We're here to serve him to understand what he wants. And that's what prophecy is about. A prophecy is knowing what God wants you to do before you have to do it. Now, whether you're Jeremiah and you have to tell the Jewish people that your temple is going to be destroyed, or you're Shmuel the prophet who's telling the people Shaul is not the right king, folks. The right king is that little redheaded guy over there, David. You know, and he just says what has to be said because he's already made himself into the vessel of that power. But that's on a national level. That's on a level of prophecy that spreads over thousands of years. There are teachings for all of us, but we all have our own little lives. And I need to know things to live properly. And how can I know things to live properly, or reverse the statement, how can I live properly if I don't know what I need to do? So we believe that the divine spark inside every Jew is actually like it's a little transmitter. It's a little transmitter deep in the heart that's actually sending us the information if we can just connect to it. And that hitpashtut of the spreading of prophecy the Rebbe talks about here, that's like you're in a huge ballroom, right? And there's a big light in the middle of the ballroom. The further you get from the big light in the middle of the room, the dimmer the light is. Until you get far on the other side of the room, the light is not so bright. You step outside, it's even less bright, and so on and so forth. So that, as a metaphor, we can understand that the prophecy that came into Moses was the most powerful revelation ever. At Mount Sinai, when those 10 commandments were given, and that revelation and the mountains on fire and thunder and lightning, all that stuff, it's not Hollywood. That's the power of the transformation of the spiritual over the physical. And that didn't go away, folks. It's been spreading and spreading and spreading for thousands of years. Now that power that was revealed then, that's been spreading for thousands of years, it gets covered over. The further we go into exile, the more it gets covered. And that's what exile is. It's the hiding of our power and our connection to that revelation. Okay, and that's, by the way, part of what we're celebrating coming up in, 13 days? You know, the Hag of Shavuot, the festival of the giving of the Torah, is we're celebrating that connection. We're still connected to it. But I don't feel it, and I don't see it, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do from minute to minute. I don't know what God wants from me. Okay, so the tzaddikim come along and teach us tools and techniques on how to get connected. Keeping the mitzvot is obviously a big program. It's a big download of mitzvot. But there's a lot of small fine-tuning that we need to do along the way as well in order to know and to address God. But the first thing we got to do is we got to get those sparks back from the snake that's swallowing up all our true selves, swallowing up our identity. B'chlal. Okay. So, we understand that the process of the generations is the process of the spreading of this power. And then suddenly someone big comes along like the Arizal, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, like the Baal Shem Tov, like Rebbe Nachman, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who he sits there and he tells you things that are true that you didn't know. Nobody knew. Check your mezuzah. Check your tefillin. Give tzedakah. Do these basic acts, the Rebbe said, and you're going to find, wow, he was right. There's a problem with my mezuzah. There's a problem with my tefillin. Little things like that aren't so little when you understand that. How did he know that? How did he know to tell Sharon what was going on in the battles of Israel when he's sitting in an office in Brooklyn? That was also a form of nevuah. Now, as the glory is elevated and expressed into the world, that wave spreads out again. So that little people like us can also get a spark of that truth for our lives. I don't need to know what's going to happen with Tzahal in the next battle, because they wouldn't listen to me anyways. But they listened to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And that's why the Rebbe said Eretz Yisrael is the safest place. And that's why he told the people were terrified in 1967 before the war in June. And the Rebbe said there's nothing to be afraid of. And he was right. Howie, how you doing? I see my old friend Howie's out there on Facebook land. Good morning. And good morning to all of you, wherever you are, or if it's nighttime, good night. Anyway, so we got some terms down here we can understand. Now we go to the next term in our title of our class, the collective soul of Israel. That's the idea of the 70 souls that were rooted in Jacob's soul that the Torah tells us about went down to Egypt. And these 70 souls are the aspect of Beshivi Nafesh Yardu Avotecha Mitzrayma, right? The 70 souls went down to Egypt. Your fathers. Whenever the Torah tells you your fathers, it means you are connected to it on an intimate way. It's not some stranger. Because you're connected to your father and your grandfather and your great-grandfather, and I don't care how far back you go, you're connected. Because genetic material, it doesn't get destroyed on a spiritual level, especially. And look at that. The first four letters of that pasuk, Shivim Nafesh Yardu Avotecha, that's Otiot Navi, prophet. Remember, there's little prophets and there's big prophets. Let's not get too excited. Because I know plenty of people walking around Jerusalem predicting things. You know what's happening? You'll say, they're crazy, they're nuts. I mean, it's like, it's so regular in Jerusalem that you don't even take it for granted, you know. But you know what? Even though they might be a little crazy, they also have a spark of that power also. And the problem is that they say things that, in a way that it's in the wrong envelope and it's delivered at the wrong time to the wrong person. Often. Because the powers of wisdom are to know when to say what where. Even if you have the truth. You can't just say it when you want. All right. Anyways, the shorsh neshamot, the fashod u'bichinat kavod. Now, the root of souls, where all of our souls emanate from in the kisei of kavod, in the world of bria, according to Kabbalah, this is an aspect of glory or honor. That you have to have honor to have a revelation. If I don't honor God, why would I expect him to talk to me? If I don't honor my fellow Jew, how would I expect to connect to him? If I don't honor my father and my mother, I'm really in trouble. Because that's one of the 10 commandments. And remember, the commandments, which Rebbe Nachman calls the advices, which is an important shift in understanding from commanded to advised, it takes the edge out of the idea, right? If you're commanded, you're like, I don't like to be commanded. But if it's an idea, an advice, well, I can hear that. So remember, it's like a pyramid again. The top of the pyramid is the 10 commandments. And then they get spread down into more mitzvot and more mitzvot, week after week, parsha after parsha, until by the time we get to the Chafetz Chaim, who writes the Mishnah Brura, we've got tens of thousands of halachot at the base of the pyramid of knowledge and the advices or commands of the Torah. So understand why it says we're all connected to the Torah Sheba'al Peh, even if I don't learn Talmud or Mishnah or Ran or Rif or Rosh or Shulchan Aruch or all the other great rabbis who came before us, because it's all coming from those original souls. All right. But we have to have this revelation of glory, of honor. And if I don't have honor, I'm already cutting myself off from the system. And the Rebbe teaches us from the kind of inverse idea from the sod, from the secret of the verse that Jacob said in his blessing to Shimon and Levi, who attacked the city of Shechem and did quite a bit of, shall we say, cultural change to the city and people of Shechem. B'sodam al tavo nafshi u'b'kahalam al tahed kavodi. So he connects the ideas for us in their secret of Shimon and Levi, that they went out and used divine names and battled and took out the city of Shechem. Yaakov said, my soul will not go with it where they go at this level because of their violence. But kahalam, and in their kahalam means the expansion of their little worlds, the tribes. But kahalam al tahed kavodi, my glory will be not unified with them. Now it's very negative prophecy that Jacob spoke about his sons Shimon and Levi and their future offspring when they expanded into the tribes. Now we know later that the tribe of Shimon had big problems because they were seduced by the people of Moab and their women. And we know the tribe of Levi was separated altogether. They weren't given an inheritance in the physical inheritance of land, because their real work, of course, their inheritance is the Beit HaMikdash. But nonetheless, there was a separation taking place, and that's the idea of where you break the kavod, is when we look at things separately. If I don't see all Jews as part of one collective soul, then I've missed the point of being a Jew, of being part of this Am Segula, this Am Nivhar, this treasured nation, this chosen people. They're chosen to be one entity called Knesset Yisrael, the collective soul of Israel. And if I make separations between them, guess who gets to be separated? Me. So we got to be real careful if I look at these Jews as not so good and these Jews as better and all these kind of categorical thinking. It's false. It just makes separations in our mind and our perception. Jew is a Jew. He keeps all the mitzvot or no mitzvot. That's God's business. If I can help him, I'm obliged to help him. How I help him, that depends on the situation. But if I see Jews as different, oh, they're Ashkenazi, oh, they're Sephardi, oh, they're Hasidic, whatever, all these categories, all they do is create little pockets in the mind of separation. That's very bad. Because it disconnects us from this idea of the honor. Because honor has to be one. If you honor everybody, whether it's a poor person or a rich person. And even non-Jews, we have to honor them, even if they're evil people. The rabbis say, kavdehu v'hashdehu. Even if it's a person there's bad things said about him and you've had negative experiences, give him a little honor, kavdehu. Give him a little kavod. Because people need that kavod anyways. And hashdehu means to be careful. Be suspicious, check him out. So that's a very important subtlety in our relationships, that we still have to show honor to people, even if we know that they're going to go off and do terrible things. Now, there is a level where The rabbis say, don't look them in the face, don't cross them on the street. There's all kinds of statements. In the Sefer Mitzvot of the Rambam says that we are anybody who learns zchut, merit, on a mesit, a person who leads people away from Judaism, like a Jew who goes out and starts his own religion. You might have heard of a few of those types of guys. Those people were not allowed to say, oh, he's a poor guy, he's a leader, and he's so powerful and charismatic that he needed to start his own religion. and it's too bad he died on a cross, etc., etc. Those people were not allowed to see the merit. Now, there might be a larger, greater function for Christianity to come around and for all the pogroms that were committed in the name of the cross. I don't know. That's God's business again. But I just know what the halacha tells us. We're supposed to find the good spark in everything. But it doesn't mean I have to honor someone who goes around deceiving people. Because when you deceive somebody, you're not just hurting them, you're hurting the children that might come after him, you're hurting his family, and you're hurting the name of Judaism. A murderer, he takes somebody out. If a person murders a Jew, first of all, the Jew gets olam haba immediately. So, these subtleties of the law are very important, and that's why we have to sit and learn them for many years, because, it's nothing is as it seems in a lot of cases. Nonetheless, that's the idea of kavod. The kavod is this unified power that's revealed when people are together. And that power is the gateway, or should we say, the portal of this power we call prophecy. Which means knowing what I need to do when I need to do it. Therefore, this revelation of glory, of honor, which is an aspect of the root soul. And root soul simply means where we're all one. Each of us, of course, is different. We're in different bodies and different continents and different mentaliut and et cetera, et cetera. But still, at a certain point, we're all one. He repeats the idea that this spreading of this power of prophecy takes place. And this is the idea it says in Masechet Shabbat, Ein anavua shora ela al hachacham gibor va'ashir. That the power of knowing the future is specifically designated for someone who is wise, someone who is powerful, and somebody who is wealthy. Now, power, it could mean a bodybuilder. It could be a guy 6'6", he plays, forward for the New York Knicks. I don't know. It also could mean somebody who is very influential with his words and charismatic with his ideas. And a chacham, of course, is a wise person who knows how to gain and use information and spread information and use the power of information properly to help people. A wise person, he's learned a lot, but his learning is not the main thing. The main thing is what you do with your learning, if you're wise. And a Shira, a wealthy person, well, we know what that means in the simple interpretation, or someone with a lot of money. He also has influence. All these types of people have influence. Because influence is also a necessary thing for other people to receive. This higher light we call the spreading of the power of prophecy. Now, of course, the Mishnah says, Ezu Ashir, Asamech v'Helko, Ezu Gibor, Akovesh et Yitzro, right? Ezu Achacham, Yodea Davar b'Tok Davar. Right? We know these other definitions that a wealthy person is someone who's happy with his portion. And I've seen a lot of happy people who don't have much, and I've seen a lot of unhappy people who have a lot of money. So you see, wealth is a very relative concept. And same thing with power. Someone who's powerful doesn't mean that he can lift up more weights or that he can throw the ball farther. It just means that he's able to conquer his inclination, that he wants to do some damage and he does it, or he wants to say something and he doesn't. he resists the urge of violence, however, whatever form it comes in. And a Hacham is somebody who, as we said, knows how to use information, but it's also somebody who knows how to compare things in a way that helps other people understand. So it's one thing to sit and learn a lot and read a lot of books. And if you have a good memory, I know people who know the whole Gemara by heart, the Shulchan Aruch, the Zohar, you name it. But if those people don't know how to bring their information down to other people into the form of language that they can use and ideas that are acceptable to them, then his wisdom stays in his head and it doesn't go in the world. So he has to be able to ledamien davar betoch davar is actually a phrase from the Sefer Yetzirah where you take one thing and you can compare it to another and compare it to another. And suddenly the world lights up with the unity of things. So when you look at a map and you see the way the river spreads, you see the way that the Mississippi River spreads, and it's fed from many tributaries, and it goes down, and then it spreads again into the Gulf. And then you look at a leaf and you say it's the same pattern. The way that the leaf distributes little veins in the leaves in order to break down the sunlight and send it to the roots of the tree. And how the pattern of the tree's growth is also, it looks like the same kind of network. And then if you look at your hands and you see the same network, and you start to see, wow, there's something going on here. There are patterns being reproduced over and over. In modern terms, it's like a hologram, where one thing is an image that gets repeated over and over on a small scale or a great scale. So someone has to be able to be wise. We have to be able to see the parallels and the connections of things. Okay, but all of these three categories are necessary to receive that influx of illumination that helps you to see the future. Ezu hacham haro'eh et hanolad. Who is wise? He's going to see what's going to be born from what is being done. You know, you see kids playing with matches. How wise do you have to be to say, you know, this could go the wrong way very quickly. Lo aleinu, Hashem yishmor. We should be protected from these things. You know, if you see somebody who's doing a certain act that's not good to him for himself, well, you can see where that's going to go if he doesn't change. And so on and so forth. So that's another idea of wisdom, is this seeing the future, but in a very practical, logical way. It's not nevuah. Nevuah is where you don't have any logical thought process. It's just, you get, the idea comes to you. Whereas we can use our reasoning powers, which they're given to us for this purpose, to be able to extract an idea from another idea from another idea, and where it's going to lead us. Okay. So we understand a little more about this spreading of prophecy onto these kinds of people. Ki kol bechinot Elohem bechinot kavod. All of them have their glory. Misham nimshach nevuah, and all of them, right, they have their access to glory. And the Rebbe brings verses that teach us this. From Shlomo Melech said, Kavod hachamim yinchalu. The glory of hachamim is inherited. Meaning, if your father is wise, there's a good chance you're going to have wisdom. And if your father is a gibor, it says, Mi ze melech hakavod Hashem izuz v'gibor. We call God as the real masterful, powerful one. So we see that the idea of glory and power are also together. You know, you think about before soldiers go out to the battle, whether it's in a locker room in Guantanamo Bay or wherever, I don't know, their camps are, whether it's on an ancient battlefield, what are they always doing first? They're beating each other, they're pounding on their chests, like the they're taking their swords and their lances and waving them in the air. That's all this idea of that I'm getting excited about what I'm going to do here, and that excitement is an extraction of the glory. We're not going off to die in battle for no reason. We're going off to save the nation. That's a glorious thing. Now, unfortunately, most wars, I would question that idea. Most wars, unfortunately, are not about the true glory. They're not about fighting for God. They're fighting for the guy who's calling the shots in the office, I'm afraid. And a lot of people have died in wars that, if we look back on them, it's pretty sad. You know, the Civil War in America, why was it fought? Because the glory of the South was not going to give up to the North and give up their plantations and slavery. That's all sounds, that's glory for what? That I can continue being a slave owner. Well, if they were smart, all they would have said, okay, because after the Civil War, it was terrible for the slaves. And the Jews were slaves in Egypt, and they know about this. The terrible part was if they had talked to the North first and said, listen, okay, we'll get rid of slavery, but we need a program to educate these people. We need a program to give them a meaningful way to make a living without working on a plantation. If we want to give them the vote, we got to give them education about government. They didn't say that. They said, no, we want to keep our slaves and we'll keep them down on the farm. And all they had to do is make a compromise of what to do with this whole mass of population that made the Southern economy. That's just an American example because, I'm from the South and I heard this rhetoric even 100 years after the Civil War was fought. And I was like, something's missing here. Something's wrong. There's no glory in fighting for an economic system. But the government spins it with glory. And it calls it courage and calls it honor and calls it bravery and calls it our way or the highway. So as a father, I tell you, it's a very hard thing. Because if you have a son and he's contemplating going out to war to fight in Iraq or to fight in Afghanistan or to fight in Syria, I wouldn't want to be the father of such a son. I'm sorry. There's no glory in these wars. Okay, enough about that. Let's keep going with the real glory is, of course, the glory of the Torah. Ein kavod ela Torah, that the Torah is God's will and it's his command and it's revelation. And that's the revelation we're building towards now in these 50 days before the Omer. Today's the 37th day of the Omer. You can count it all day because it's always realigning our mind to our place in time. And we need to be in time in order to rise out of time. Understand, you have to have your feet on the ground. You have to have a watch to know what you're doing and where to be, when to be there. And only when I'm grounded like that can my mind really rise up above time. And that's what counting the Omer is about too. All right. But Hashem is the glorious one and he has the power. He's the Gibor and he's wealthy. Obviously, Hashem is a multi-trillionaire. Right? Ma'asher la'avinu asad kol kavod hazeh. So here we see that that the patriarchs, that in this particular example, that Jacob is talking about the wealth of his father. And he calls it the wealth glory. So obviously, when you get out of a limousine, people look at you. That's glory. Or you wear a $500, well, maybe a $5,000 watch nowadays. People look at your watch and they're like, wow, that's glory. That's not glory. That's fallen glory. The real glory is in the light of your Torah, of your face, of your smile, of your care, of your knowledge. That's where the glory is. And we have to lift it up. And when we lift it up, guess what? Out comes the vision of the future. That's the spreading of prophecy. The Rebbe is talking about. Oy li shecharavti et beiti v'sarafti techali v'higleti et banai leben umot olam. Now we see another inverse pasuk to teach us the concept that God himself said, woe to me that I destroyed my house and I burnt my palace and I sent my children into exile amongst the nations. Oy li, why is God mourning? God's the one who gave He doesn't give the command for evil, by the way. He just lets evil do what evil does. But regardless, we understand from this pasuk ideas that we've already touched on earlier in the Torah. That when God says, I destroyed my house, the Rebbe brings the pasuk, that my house is a house of prayer for all the nations. And if God destroys the house of prayer, guess what? That's a defect in prayer itself, that we lose part of the power of prayer. And sarafti heichali, and I burnt my palace. This is, well, if you're a wealthy guy and your house gets burnt, God forbid, that's a pagam in a person's kavod. Suddenly he's homeless. Like, unfortunately, a lot of the beautiful Jews here in Israel have had their houses burnt recently. That's a takedown, that's a takedown in kavod. In God's palace, everyone says glory, right? When you walk into the house of the king, you forget about, your iPhone. You forget about, your tennis date. You're like in awe of the moment and the space that you're in. Certainly in God's, if it's true in a king's palace down here, it's going to be true when you walk into the pearly gates. And neglected banai, and this idea of exiling my children, this is, the Rebbe says, bitul hanevuah sheba b'nefashot b'nei Israel. This is the canceling of the prophecy that's coming from those root souls. Why? Because of the disconnection. That if we disconnect ourselves from those root souls, we're going to lose that power. That power to see into the future. Even if it's just 5 minutes in the future, it'll help you a lot, If you're a high-speed trader on Wall Street, if you knew something 5 minutes ahead of time, you might make a few. And this is, again, the idea of the 70 souls that went down, our fathers, to Egypt. Right? And even though we are not prophets, our fathers were. And we are extractions of that. Ki galut b'nei Yisrael hu b'chinat bitul hanevuah sheba'a nafshotam. And this idea of the loss, the exile of the Jews, is the idea of the loss of this power. Right? The bitul of the ability to see. Now, each person has their own ability to see what they need to see. But I firmly believe that God does not expect anything from anybody without telling them first, somehow, that it's coming. That I got to look around. That I got to pray. Because God is fair, and He's loving, and He's patient. And He knows how limited we can be intellectually, shall we say. How limited we can be intuitively as well. He knows. He knows how hard and dark this world is. He knows how hard it is to keep a good thought in your brain for more than 30 seconds. And He wants to help us, and He wants to guide us. And I just have to know that that's true, and to stop and open my mind, and open my heart, and find the glory, and find that glory for other people as well. And all of a sudden, you'll start to see. You'll start to know the right moves to make. And the messages will start to come to you. Now, there's a lot more that can be said about this, obviously. We're going to continue with this Torah. Right now, we're in transition between our Facebook Live classes that we've been doing for several months now, and to uploading our classes to our Patreon page. There's a lot of technical activity that has to take place, and we're working it through. But nonetheless, we hope to be there every morning, and if we miss you one morning, we'll be back the next. But God bless all of you with the faith in the process. We've entered a process. And this finding of the glory is also about the revelation, because if all the Jews come back to the land, guess what? What do the rabbis say? Then the return of prophecy. Why? Because it's that collective soul. The collective soul brings down the vision of the future. If we're all dispersed, why did always the kings that conquered Israel disperse us? Because they knew how powerful we are when we're together. So think about it. Look back, whether it was Titus or Nebuchadnezzar or a few other more modern empires we could talk about that always were trying to split the Jews up and not let them in the land. Whether it was Queen Victoria or a few other monarchs around the world, number one thing is don't let the Jews back in the land, because when we get back in the land, we get our power back. We get unified. And that's what, unfortunately, that's what certain foolish elements in the world don't want, because they think they're staying on top and on power by keeping us down. And it's not true. The rabbis say, if the non-Jews knew what they lost when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, they would